Okay, hi everyone, and thank you for being here with me today for our Monday Healing Step session inside the Bridge to Healing community. Now, if you haven't met me yet, I'm Janine Nowis, your grief and trauma relief specialist, and I work with trauma survivors, people just like you who are ready to reconnect with themselves, release old patterns, and find peace again. Now, if you're joining me live, go ahead and say hello and type pound live in the comments. I'd love to know where you're joining me from. And if you're watching the replay, go ahead and type pound replay so I can welcome you later. So each week in this space, we gently explore how trauma affects your daily life. And more importantly, how healing is not only possible, but deeply personal and uniquely yours. So today's conversation is about something many trauma survivors wrestle with, and they often do this silently, especially after they've already started their healing work. Who am I really without all the pain, the patterns, the people pleasing, the control, the shutdown? Now, you might feel confused, unsure if your reactions and your preferences are coming from your true self or from adaptations you made to survive. So you may be even asking yourself, do I like this or am I just used to tolerating it? So, or is it something like this? Is this boundary real or am I just avoiding conflict? So let's go ahead and talk about how trauma shapes identity and how we can begin gently reconnecting to the self beneath all the layers. So let's begin with a truth that many survivors don't hear. And that is, and actually they don't even hear enough of, you are not your trauma responses. But I know that can be hard to believe because for so long, those responses may have felt like the only way you knew how to move through the world. And when you've experienced trauma, especially early or prolonged trauma, your nervous system adapts in ways that prioritize safety above all else. So these adaptations become patterns, and those patterns, repeated over time, start to feel like traits, like just who you are. Now, let me give you some examples of what that might look like. So, you've always tried to avoid conflict, even when something hurts you. And people call you easygoing, but inside, you're swallowing your truth to keep the peace. And you feel hyper responsible for everyone else's emotions. You're the fixer, the helper, the one people rely on. But no one sees how tired you are, and you feel the need to be perfect. And if you make a mistake, it feels unbearable. You push yourself hard, not because you love achievement, but because deep down, you're afraid of being judged, rejected, or abandoned. You emotionally shut down when things get overwhelming and you feel numb, disconnected, or frozen. And then you blame yourself for not being stronger or more present. So, if any of this resonates with you, I want to pause right here and say this clearly. These are not flaws, these are survival strategies. And you develop them because at one point they helped you stay safe. And you may have learned that it wasn't safe to speak up, so silence became your protection. You may have learned that being helpful, accommodating, or pleasing others kept you out of harm's way. So those roles became a part of your identity. And you may have learned to scan for danger constantly, to stay one step ahead, so your hyper awareness felt like a gift, even though it exhausted you. And over time, these adaptations become so automatic, they get woven into your sense of self. You don't think, this is my trauma response. You think, this is who I am. Well, what if that's not the whole story? What if there's more of you underneath that? Parts of you that never got a chance to emerge because survival took center stage. Parts of you that are creative, bold, soft, messy, curious, calm, and worthy. Not because you've earned it, but because it's who you really are. This is why it's so important to start asking, is this really me? Or is this a pattern I developed to stay safe? It's not about blaming yourself, it's about reclaiming yourself. And it's also not about erasing everything you've done to survive. Those patterns served you, and they helped you navigate a world that didn't always feel safe. But healing asks us to get curious, to gently hold those patterns with compassion, and to explore whether they're still necessary now. So let's take a moment to reflect on this together. Have you ever confused a survival pattern with your personality? Now think about a behavior you repeat often, something like over-explaining, overworking, withdrawing, avoiding conflict, or being hyper-independent. And then ask yourself, did I choose this? Or did this become necessary? If something's coming up for you, you can drop a word in the comments to name the pattern. Or if you prefer to reflect quietly, just take a moment to notice what's stirring. You're not alone in this. Those patterns make so much sense in light of what you've lived through. And now that we're gently opening this door, let's move into the next layer of understanding. And that's how these patterns affect your present life and relationships. And what begins to shift when you start reconnecting with the parts of you that have been hidden underneath them. Now that we've brought awareness to the patterns that helped you survive, let's look at how those same patterns can sometimes interfere with what you truly long for, which is authentic connection. Because here's the hard truth. Many survivors wrestle with silently. The very strategies that once kept you safe, like people-pleasing, staying silent, controlling every detail, or avoiding vulnerability, can also keep you at a distance from others. So let's pause here and breathe. This isn't about blame. It's about gently uncovering why certain relationship dynamics feel confusing, painful, or unfulfilling. And you might crave closeness, but find yourself withdrawing the moment someone gets too close. You might say yes when you need to say no, just to avoid the risk of disappointment or rejection. You might keep everything under control because chaos used to mean danger, but in doing so, you shut out support. Or maybe you never share your truth because being too much once got you hurt. These are not character defects. They are the brilliant ways your nervous system learned to guard your heart. But over time, they can create disconnection from others and from yourself. Survivors often tell me, I don't feel seen, or no one really knows me. And when we explore that feeling deeper, what we uncover is this. They don't feel known because they haven't felt safe enough to show who they truly are. So the intimacy they long for, the connection, the support, the love, remains just out of reach. Not because they're broken, but because a part of them is still guarding the door. So here's where the healing begins. When you start to recognize your survival patterns, not with judgment, but with compassion, you give yourself the opportunity to choose something new. You can begin to move toward connection, not from fear, but from awareness. And that doesn't mean pushing yourself into vulnerability before you're ready. It means creating the conditions where vulnerability becomes possible, where safety grows from within. And that's a journey worth taking, because the more you reconnect with the real you, the one who existed before the trauma, the one still alive underneath the layers of coping, the more space you create for relationships that are rooted in truth rather than protection. Now, in the next section here, I'm going to go ahead and share a personal story of when one of my survival patterns started to unravel, how I realized it was getting in the way of connection, and the shift that began when I approached it with curiosity instead of shame. So let's keep breathing together and move into that story now. So let me share this personal story with you. There was a time when I truly believed I was just wired to be overly responsible, always the one fixing things, staying strong, being 2 steps ahead. I thought it was just my personality. I didn't realize at first that this was a survival role I had unconsciously stepped into. And growing up, being responsible made me feel safe. If I could anticipate everyone's needs, avoid mistakes, and keep the peace, I might avoid punishment, rejection, or pain. But years later, I started to notice something strange. Even in relationships where there was no threat, no danger, where people were kind and supportive, I still couldn't fully relax. I still felt like I had to earn my place, like I had to keep doing to be worthy of belonging. And one day, someone asked me a simple question: what would it feel like to be fully supported without having to prove anything? I didn't know how to answer. The thought of not doing anything to be safe felt really foreign to me, and honestly, a little scary. And that moment stuck with me. And slowly I began to unravel the belief that I had to perform safety in order to deserve love. And I realized I wasn't naturally overly responsible. I was trained by life to survive that way. And here's the breakthrough: when you can separate who you truly are from who you became in order to survive, healing begins. I started to give myself permission to just be, to rest, to receive, to make mistakes, to speak up when I felt unheard. And each time I did, it was uncomfortable, but it was also freeing. And then bit by bit, I began to reclaim parts of myself I hadn't known were hidden underneath the armor. And that's what I want for you too. So, not to fix yourself, but to remember yourself, to come back to the version of you who existed before the survival roles took over. Because that version of you, your true self, isn't gone. She's just been there waiting, waiting for safety, waiting for permission, waiting for you. And today I want to offer you a simple, gentle way to begin reconnecting with her. So let's move into a supportive practice that can help you meet those protective parts of yourself with compassion, and as well as create just a little more space to breathe and be. Are you ready? So let's go ahead and begin. So one of the most empowering ways to begin shifting these deeply ingrained survival patterns is through a practice I call compassionate naming. And here's what I mean. Instead of immediately trying to change the pattern or criticizing yourself for falling into it, take a pause when you notice it and then gently name it out loud or in your journal. So, for example, there's my need to fix things again. That helped me feel safer growing up. I see myself trying to disappear in this moment that used to protect me. I'm feeling the urge to people please right now, and that used to keep the peace. So just naming the pattern with curiosity and compassion softens its grip. Why? Because the moment you name it, you create a pause, a space between the past and the present. That space is where healing begins. You're not pushing the pattern away, you're not shaming it, you're acknowledging it with love and awareness. And in doing so, you start to reclaim your choice. And that, my friend, is powerful. This isn't about forcing change. It's about gently creating a relationship with the part of you that learned how to survive. And in that relationship, you'll find something surprising. Your strength didn't start with the pattern, it endured in spite of it. Would you like to try this today? So let's anchor it with a journaling prompt that can deepen your connection with your inner truth. So take a moment with your journal or even a quiet inner reflection if you don't have it nearby. Let's let this question guide you. Who might I have been if I hadn't needed to stay so guarded, so responsible, so small, or so perfect to feel safe? I'm going to repeat that again in case you want to jot that down. Who might I have been if I hadn't needed to stay so guarded, so responsible, so small, or so perfect to feel safe? And allow whatever comes to rise without judgment. This isn't about rewriting the past. It's about remembering that your soul has always carried more than your survival was. So let yourself feel into that truth, even if it's just for a moment. Now you can type a word or a phrase in the comments if you'd like to share, or hold it quietly in your heart and know this. Whatever you remember, whatever flicker of self returns, it's real and it's welcome here. And as we close today, I want to remind you of something that's easy to forget when you've been surviving for so long. You are not the pattern. You are not the overachiever, the fixer, the people pleaser, the one who stays silent to keep the peace. Those roles may have helped you stay safe, but they are not who you are. There is a version of you, maybe quiet right now, maybe uncertain, but still present beneath all of it. And that version of you deserves to be seen, supported, and heard. And the fact that you're here listening to this conversation tells me you're already in motion. Healing is not something you start from scratch, it's something you return to with every breath, with every choice to show up for yourself, just like you're doing right now. And you don't have to figure it all out on your own. If today's conversation stirred something within you, maybe a sense of recognition or even a quiet relief that you're not alone, there's this next step that you can take. I invite you to schedule a healing connection call. It's a no-fee clarity call where we'll gently explore just one area in your life where you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure. This is a supportive space to gain insight, receive guidance, and feel deeply heard. And there's no pressure or obligation, just one clear and compassionate conversation focused on what you need right now. And if that feels like something you're ready for, the link in this post is down in the comments below this video. So just scroll down, click, and find a time that works for you. And you'll find the Healing Connection call link in the comments below. Looking forward to seeing you on the next Monday Healing Steps session. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.